Welcome Strategy Battle Games to our GBHL YouTube video. You're here, your host GBHL Damian, and I am back at my parents' house. And last time I was here, I did some kind of reflective videos about my fantasy armies that seemed to be quite popular. And people were saying that they'd like to see some of the other stuff. So I decided to do a little featurette about one of my other passions from back in the day, and something I still enjoy a lot. From the glory days of Games Workshop, which is this Man of War. So what I'm going to do is there's going to be two parts to this. I'm going to have a little chat with you. There's going to be one video today. I'm going to have a chat about Man of War, kind of what it was, why you should potentially play it, and then tomorrow, or either tomorrow or in a couple of days, there's going to be a battle report that will show you how the game plays and give you something a bit different. So I hope you enjoy this, and another kind of look back at the past of Games Workshop's glory days. So what is Man of War? Man of War is, to quote their taglines, raging sea battles in the world of Warhammer. So this is, it's set in the old world, the Warhammer world, God rest its soul, that has recently been blown up, and it's a naval war game. So you take command of a fleet, and you kind of try and attack your opponents and destroy their fleet, and it is brilliant fun. Give it a bit of history. It came out in 1993, so over 22 years ago, and it was just around the time I was getting into it. And potentially part of my love stems from it because of this. This is White Dwarf 168, which was dated December 1993. And why this issue is important is because, fact fans, this is the first issue of White Dwarf I ever had. I kind of got pushed, we kind of discussed before how you get into the game, but I can't quite remember, but I'd played Hero Quest at a mate's house, and one of my mates, a kind of older brother figure, was into kind of historical war game, and I played a couple of games with him, and somehow I ended up in the Games Workshop with the magazine, and I picked up this. And in December 1993, Man of War was on sale. It had been on sale for a while then, and inside it there was an advert somewhere, he says, this, for some Man of War content. These kind of heavy metal pages. There's some Orc Wyvern riders, some Imperial Griffin riders, and a little picture of battle like that. And there's also a whole bunch of fantasy dwarf slayers there. So why is that important? Because once I got this issue and I was looking through it, and as a fan of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, then I was into kind of fantasy stuff. I thought these two pages really interested me. There's also some stuff about Skaven in here. The first Skaven Armies book had just come out, so they had some stuff in there. Some stuff about Death Company Space Marines. There's a Space Marine battle report, as in that Space Marine, which is the old version of Epic. There's a battle report of that. But the stuff about fantasy that really got me was these pictures. And so I can't remember quite how it happened, but my mum said, do you want some models? And I went, yeah. And I'll have some of those, the Orc Wyvern riders from Man of War, because they were orcs, which are out of Lord of the Rings. I didn't have a clue what Warhammer was, or what Warhammer 40,000 was, or what Man of War was, but I asked for them, and they were the first models I ever had. There's a potential that I might have had Advanced Hero Quest, the box set, but the first box of models I ever got from Games Workshop were 3 Orc Wyvern riders for Man of War. Bizarre, right? And so I then didn't play it. I never played Man of War when I was a kid. I got into Warhammer and these 3 Orc Wyvern riders that I had a look for, and they're about somewhere but I couldn't find them, which kind of annoyed me a bit. They never got painted, fairly obviously, and they just got left in a box, and I think I converted one of the sets of wings into a banner at some point or something, I don't know. But yeah, they never got played with, and I never really played Man of War because it then vanished. So as I said, this was in December 1993, and what Games Workshop used to do is they always had Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 on the shelves. This is kind of from the 90s onwards, but then periodically they would release a new game, and they would support that game for about 2 years. So examples of these are things like Blood Bowl, Man of War, Necromunda, Warhammer Quest, Mordheim, Battlefleet Gothic, all those kind of games, the War Masters and all, the kind of games that got tagged specialist games. And what would generally happen was they'd release this, and they'd release a bunch of supplements for it, and inside the shops you would have their third game, Warhammer 40,000 and the third game, and they would support that third game for about 2 years, 3 years, until the next third game came out. then it would leave the shelves, and you could still buy it online until they kind of ran out of stock. And Man of War was one of these games. So it was released about 1993, and it was in the shops till about 1995, and it was very, very cool. So it was a big box game, and as I just showed you, this is the box set here. Now this was, believe it or not, £25 when it was released. You don't get a whole lot of models in it, so it might not be that amazing, but it's the same as the first Warhammer box that had something like 80 plastic models in it. It was 30 quid when it was first released. It's kind of crazy the way these things have changed. But yeah, Man of War was £25, and you got that big box set which contained some plastic ships that I'll show you in a minute, and a whole bunch of card, because this was very much in the era, the Games Workshop era, where they loved card. They loved cards and tokens and all sorts of things. So if I do have a look through here, what you end up with, you didn't get these kind of olive oil boxes, these are my own invention, but usually they're full of counters, and you'll see more of these when we do the battle report. There's just boxes of counters that you use throughout the game. You also have the rulebook, which is this, all black and white, all paper, no kind of glossy stuff in these days. You get things like, you've got this kind of scenery, these scenery pieces, these are like islands, which won't be in the battle report, don't worry, I never really use these. And you've got things like various templates. So we have, that's the elf range ruler, which you'll see in the battle report. Little charts and this sort of thing, but loads and loads of card. And that was the box set for £25. They also then, and what basically happened in that is you got the rules for how to play the game, and you got army lists for 6 armies, which were High Elves, Dark Elves, Empire, Bretonnians, Orcs and Dwarfs. And yeah, that was the starting set. And then basically the miniatures range were all metal after the plastic ships that you got in the box. And they would release either a big ship, which was called a man of war. So you had ships of the line, which were your small ships, and ships, and men of war, which were your bigger ships. And you'd get like a big ship for 5 quid, or 3 small ships for 5 quid, something like that. And that's how you collected it. And what was great about it, like so many of these specialist games, was that Emma walked in. Hello. Sorry. Honestly. She's gone now. So what was great about these specialist games was that they were quite cheap to get into. So assuming you only wanted one fleet, you'd only have to spend 15-20 quid to get all the models. And cynics have argued that that's why Games Workshop stopped doing these specialist games, because once you'd bought into them, you didn't have to keep paying money, essentially. If you bought a Blood Bowl team, you bought it, that was it. You might buy a couple of star players, but that's all you needed. There wasn't that kind of same incentive to keep buying. And of course, the positive outlook on it is that everyone got into them. Whenever one of these games came out, you started playing them generally, because it would only cost you 10 quid, 15 quid to get a gang together and start playing that game. But you know, that's just difference of opinion between players and the management, I guess. But yeah, so it was quite cheap to get into, and you could get these 6 fleets. And then obviously, as they always do, they released some expansions. And the first expansion was one I haven't actually got, which is called Plague Fleet, and that basically introduced all the chaos fleets. So there were special ships for like Zinch and Slaanesh and Khorne and Nurgle. There was also Skaven ships in that, and some Norse ships as well, which is pretty cool. And the second expansion was this one, Sea of Blood, which is really cool because this introduced flyers and sea monsters into the game, both of which are cool things. And I'll show you some models and some examples of this in a minute, but in the battle report we won't be showing you how they work in the game, because whilst they're cool, they just add extra complication to it. So we're going to keep the battle report relatively simple for you. But yeah, so suddenly this introduced things like Dragon Riders for the High Elves and Manticore Riders for the Dark Elves, and of course the Orc Wyvern Riders, which were the first models I'd got. They also introduced cool sea monsters, and so they made models for that, and you can buy all these, 3 Wyvern Riders for a £5 again and stuff like that. There was a fairly big range for it. And so yeah, this was released by Games Workshop. It was supported very well. There was a couple of battle reports in White Dwarf and stuff. I haven't actually got the White Dwarf when it was released, but this is 168, which was December 1993, and I think by Christmas 1994 it had gone So I'd guess it came out probably at the start of 1993, maybe, something like that. I don't think I've got that issue though. I had a feeling I did, but I couldn't find it. Might be that it's actually at Twickenham. But yeah, it was quite a cool little bit of history, and it's very fondly remembered. There's, you know, if you played back then, people loved it. It's a very cool game. It's got a great little rule system that actually works in a kind of I go you go with a thing called initiative, which is very similar to priority. So it's not my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. It can change, as you'll see in the battle report, which at the time for Games Workshop was very revolutionary. You didn't get that in Games Workshop games. You know, it was my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. So the game plays really well, and there's definitely flaws in it. You can see that it's, you know, it's designed at a period of time for Games Workshop where they were just doing really cool creative stuff, like tons and tons of fun things. And you know, some of the rules don't match up with the reference charts, and some of them just don't explain things. And we'll try and keep some of those more complicated stuff out of the game. But an army I won't show you because I haven't got the models here are the Orcs, and the Orcs had a ship called a Driller Killer, which is essentially just a giant spinning drill that could just go forward into other boats and kind of destroy them, which is kind of cool. And I remember reading an article with Jervis Johnson at some point, you know, in the last 5-10 years, where he said when they look back at Man of War, they just kind of laugh and say, what the hell were we thinking? You know, why were orcs on ships? You know, they could have done a naval game these days, but it wouldn't have been like that. They wouldn't have these giant mechanical drills. And there's a part of me that is kind of glad they made it when they did, because that's part of what gives this game so much of its charm and so much of its fun level. So it's well worth it. There's not a lot of people out there who have it now, relatively speaking, so it might be hard to track down, but it's well worth it. If you were interested in getting it, I did a little look on eBay, and the starter box, the Man of War box, brand new, goes for about 50 quid, which really isn't that bad, considering it's not been in production for 20 years. So that's quite achievable. The Sea of Blood box set seems to go for about 20-25, and of course it's the ships, the metal ships, where that are relatively expensive, because depending on what you're getting, they tend to go for about, those boxes, like I said, used to be a £5, will be about 15-20 quid, something like that. So relatively expensive, but of course they're expensive compared to what they used to be on sale for. But compared to getting into a new game these days, it's not that expensive, because it means you pick up your whole fleet to play the whole game would probably cost you between £50 and £100, something like that. And you can get good deals on armies and stuff. So it is out there on eBay and it is accessible. There's also a Yahoo group that I drop into every now and again called the Sea of Claws. That's, as far as I know, the most active Man of War forum. It's a bit, obviously, it's a kind of dated forum, dated style rather than Facebook group. They might have a Facebook group now, actually, to be fair, I haven't looked. But I know that there was a few passionate Man of War players on there who I still get emails about it periodically. So it's worth chasing up. Now, something that is tied into this that you probably remember is that a few years ago, GW brought out a new naval game, and as often happens with these things, as the rumours abounded about this, people thought it was Man of War. People thought they were bringing back Man of War in the way they brought back Epic, in the way they brought back Blood Bowl, and they were going to do a brand new version of Man of War in a plastic box set. But, as you may remember, it wasn't Man of War, it was Dreadfleet. Dreadfleet came out, I can't actually remember, I've got the White Dwarf in here. I can't remember if these White Dwarfs have the date anymore, do they? October 2011 it does. Wow, October 2011. God, that's depressing. So this is nearly 4 years ago that this came out. And they released it, and they had this brand new box game, and it was nothing. It wasn't Man of War. It's about the same scale. It's a slightly different scale, but it's similar. The ships are broadly the same. And you probably know a bit more about Dreadfleet if you've been playing the game, because you might remember the White Dwarf coverage for it. And basically, inside of this issue of White Dwarf, they released Dreadfleet, and the entire issue is about Dreadfleet. And it's a one-off box game that contains everything you want to play. And then the next issue, it vanished. And they actually, I remember seeing a presentation with them where they said, we're going to sell it, we're going to promote it, and then we're never going to talk about it again. And that's exactly what they did. It was like a Space Hulk thing. They released it, and then it was gone. And there was no other fleets for it or anything like that. And it also, I believe it went down pretty badly. I know a lot of people thought it was going to sell out like Space Hulk, so I bought loads of copies and then it didn't sell out at all. But I've never played it in the classic way we often do. As I said, I got it 4 years ago, and here are the ships. And here are the ships. The models are absolutely stunning. The models are gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous in this, but I've just never got around to assembling it or painting it. But I would like to at some point. And I've heard, you know, the kind of internet nerd rages that, oh, it's awful, it's rubbish. But I think the more measured response is it's a good laugh. If you want to have fun with your mates, it's a good laugh. So I hope at some point I'll get those ships assembled, but we all know how unlikely that is. But I picked it up because it reminded me of my Man of War days. So I have that box set, and that is readily available. I think it now goes for under retail value, so you can get that for 50 quid as well. So if you are interested in a naval war game, you might want to pick up Dreadfleet potentially. But if you have played Dreadfleet, please let me know what you thought of it. Put comments below. Is it good? Is it worth doing? Is it worth devoting a couple of months of my life? I'm sure this will take to paint up. Or should I just keep playing through the big grey Lord of the Rings mountain? So there we go. There's a bit of history about Games Workshop's naval war games. I just wanted to address Dreadfleet before people thought, well, didn't this get re-released a few years ago? It's not the same game as Man of War at all. Small scale ships in the Warhammer world, but the game mechanics are completely different. So Man of War is tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of fun. I would highly recommend that you give it a go. It is possible to get into it now. As I said, you know, it is available on eBay. Those sorts of prices if you want to go and get it. I know it's a bit of a punt, but we're going to have a battle report up for you that will kind of show you how it works, and if you like it, maybe we'll do it. Potentially, who knows, we could potentially do a club day of it if it is popular. If we could maybe put it on at Titans or something, if people want to come and have a game of it, I'm not sure. But yeah, there's some stuff about Man of War. So what I'm now going to do is show you my Man of War collection and the miniatures. And it's actually probably worth pointing out before I do that this is unique for me amongst my hobbying stuff, in that I actually I told you I didn't play Man of War when it came out, but I got into Man of War when about 8 years ago or something, when I wasn't really playing anything else. And the reason I did it was because I'd always wanted to play it, and I wanted a small scale game. I was in a flat at the time, a flat share, and I wanted a game I could play with other people, that like a war game, that didn't require a lot of models, didn't require a lot of storage. And I'd always wanted to play Man of War, so I got into that and I bought the models eBay, and I bought them all painted. So there's a couple of exceptions that I'll show you in a minute, but the vast majority of these models are not painted by me, which is unique. All my Warhammer armies I painted, everything for Lord of the Rings I've painted myself. But yeah, my Man of War stuff I didn't, so I actually bought the models off eBay fully painted and was looking for good deals. And I think I've done really well, generally speaking. Like the models I've got, particularly my Dwarf fleet, are beautifully painted, so thank you whoever did those out there. And I've picked them up, bought them as whole fleets a few years ago. So yeah, there's no painting credit for me apart from the sea monsters that I'll show you. But yeah, they're a cool little collection, and I'll show you the kind of models now. And here we go. So here is my Man of War collection. We have the sea monsters, the Empire fleet, and the Dwarf fleet. And then down here we have the Dark Elf fleet and we have the High Elf fleet. So I've got 4 different fleets painted up and ready to go. My friend also, my friend Adam, who will be in the back rep with me, also has an Orc fleet. But these are the ones we've got. So I might as well start with the sea monsters because they're at the front. And as I said, these are the only models I've painted up. So here they are. We have the Sea Dragon, who's pretty cool. They're lovely models. These are metal. The Black Leviathan, who's incredible in the game. He's really, really cool if you get him in your fleet. The Promethean, who's cool. Triton. The Megalodon. The Sea Elemental, I think that was called. The Behemoth. The Gargantuan, which is a big snake. And the Kraken. So obviously these days... Oh right, well that's broken. Brilliant. These days you could have these two facing off in a sort of mega shark versus giant octopus face off, which I'm sure would be great. Now down here we have the Gargantuan and his base. So It's always I do despise doing these showcases for you guys because they break my models. But here's a Gargantuan, so you get an idea of how big they are. They're not. These are not by no means like my most incredible paint jobs or anything, but I painted these a couple of years back. I actually did them because we ran a little tournament where four of us, one of whom was our very own Mr. Tom Harrison. We played a one-day Man of War tournament, and I wanted all the sea monsters to be painted up and available. So I did these, and I was quite pleased with how they came out. But they match the kind of they're very of their time. They're very kind of stylized and cool. Some of them are better in the game than others. As memory serves, Triton's fairly awful, but the Sea Dragon and the Black Leviathan in particular are great. So there we go, those are the sea monsters. So next up I'm going to have a look at the Empire fleet. And I'll start with these guys because these are the plastic ships you get in the box. So just little fairly basic detail. Remember, these are 22 years old, so they're not the best. And again, with all the painting, if they're good, I can't take credit, and if they're bad, you can't blame me. But these are the basic plastic ships you get in the box. You'd get, I think you got 12 of these in it, and these are the basic ships of the line for Empire. And as Games Workshop often do, or certainly often did, they also made these. Now these are also war galleys, but they are metal. So these ones, you see under there, are the detail on them is just better, and they are better models. But these are your very basic, your bog standard Imperial ships. And as you can see, the banners, the sails that you added, and the little pennants at the top were all made the armies look incredibly cool. Irrelevant to the painting, you very much have to scale out of this and look at the fleet, and it looks pretty damn awesome. You notice that each of the pennants at the top are different, and that is because you needed a different pennant to tell them apart. If you can imagine, you've got these three ships on the board, they all take different damage, so you need a different thing like the eagle, the castle, and the sun to tell them apart during the game. So we have those. We also have I think they're called Hellhammers down here, which have a giant cannon on top, which is pretty damn cool. You also have the Wolf ships. And so these guys, these are Imperial ships with a giant ram on the front, and these were far more powerful ships. They're bigger. You'll see these in the battle report, I imagine, and they're a more effective ship of the line, but they still worked in squadrons of 3 like the war galleys did. And right at the back we have the coolest ships for Empire, which are the Great ships. And I've got 2 of them, so I'll see if I can get one of these out without breaking it. Would be quite the miracle. And here we go. Again, I didn't paint these. I bought them like this, but you get these kind of big ships. You can sort of see the scale compared to them. Actually scales up quite nicely compared to the sea monsters, these giant sea monsters coming out and attacking the ships. Loads and loads of cool pennants and flags. And bizarrely, you'll see that the masts are all different lengths, and there was actually a mast sprue. So if you imagine the ship down here is a metal base with 3 mast glue into it, and you cut the mast to the right size. And it's actually the mast sprues that go for the most money on eBay these days, because if you can imagine, as they're cut up over the years, they then lose their value and you kind of lose them. So the ship bodies are fairly easy to come by, but it's the mast sprues that people are really keen on. But this was the biggest ship for the Empire. You'll also notice back here there's some kind of scenery I made. I actually made these rocky crags, they're awful, but they were actually for a Warhammer scale fantasy, a Warhammer scale naval game that I made up the rules for. Who knows, maybe you'll see those ships that are in the garage at some point. So we use them in this big rocky cliff and a goldfish bowl castle. So there you go, that is the Empire fleet, which I think is pretty cool. And that's your kind of bog standard fleet, which will certainly feature in the battle report. And we haven't quite decided who they'll be facing in the battle report, but it will be either the Dwarven fleet or the High Elf fleet. So let's have a look at the Dwarf fleet. So immediately you notice the biggest thing about these guys is they don't have sails. They've got little pennants to tell them apart, but they don't have sails because Dwarf ships in Man of War don't move by sail, they move by steam power. So we have these guys. These are the Dwarven ships of the line, which are called the Nautiluses, or Nautili. No, they're not. They're called Monitors, sorry, Monitors, which are very cool. And I bought pretty much, I think, this entire fleet in one bundle deal, which is quite cool, which is why they're all tied together, and they're really nicely painted by whoever did these. These are the Dwarven Monitors, which move in squadrons of 3. As you can see, I've got a squadron there and a squadron there. I've also got at the front these guys, and these are the Nautilus. So I'll leave it up to you to figure out where they got that name from and where they got the inspiration from. But this is a Dwarven submarine, which is really cool. So this thing could go underwater. Again, like absolutely crazy to think you'd be able to do this in a fantasy setting, but very stylized Warhammer stuff. So this thing could go underwater and then shoot torpedoes, which makes it incredibly effective at destroying the bigger ships, because it can attack the below the waterline area and sink ships, which is a big thing in Man of War. So you can have them. So I've got 3 of those available. We've also then got the 3 of the next size up, which are these guys. And these were called, is this the Ironclad? I think this is the Ironclad. And I've got 3 of these again. You can hopefully see lovely, lovely little details with all the gun turrets and stuff. Paint job, a good paint job on these really does make a difference. They're very, 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 very cool. I got 3 of those. So again, you've got lots of options in your dwarf fleet. And right at the back, I have the Big Daddy, which is the Dreadnought. And this thing is incredibly powerful in the game. You can see sort of scale-wise. Again, it's coming up like that on the sea monster, so it's pretty big. About the size of the great ship, and it's this huge armoured thing. The dwarfs work completely differently. As I said, they use steam to move, which means they're not affected by the wind, as you'll see in the battle report. They also couldn't have wizards. They couldn't have magic, but they get a few other bonuses. That basically their things are big like armoured tanks. So unless you've damaged a ship, you can't board it, and they can repair damage to ships, which makes them pretty unique. So they're quite cool in Man of War terms. And finally, lurking at the back, I have these guys, which are the Dwarven War Balloons. How cool is that? You could get gyrocopters as well, but I was always drawn to the War Balloons. I have to say, these guys are absolutely awful in the game. They're horrendous. Flyers are really, really cool in Man of War, but most of them aren't particularly effective. You notice down here, inside this old classic Citadel flying base, there's a 1. You notice the other ones over there will have different numbers, 2 and 3, and again that was to tell them apart. The flyers couldn't have pennants on them, it didn't make a lot of sense. So you had 1, 2 and 3 instead to tell them apart. So again, you probably won't be seeing any flyers in the battle report because they add an extra level of complication. But it did add something, even if they weren't that effective in the game, it added a really nice kind of visual thing to have dragons and war balloons and stuff flying over the table. So that's the one shot off with the Sea Monsters, Empire and Dwarfs, and now we're going to go and have a look at the High Elves and Dark Elves with another rocky crag and this island that again are made for the fantasy scale with some jungle trees that have long since snapped off. Don't know if any of you guys remember this, but this was these jungle trees came out for the for 40K's 3rd edition, I think. The ones where the Dark Elder were introduced, and they were good for this fantasy scale war game that I created, but they look a bit big for this. So let's start with the High Elves. The High Elves are probably my least impressive looking fleet. Again, I bought them all painted, and they're not the best paint jobs, but we can have a look at these guys. So these are the tiniest ships of the line, called the Hawk ships. It's always hard painting white, I think, so we can forgive whoever did these, but tiny, tiny little ships. The strength of the High Elves was that the shooting was better. You can shoot further with them, and also they could move quicker. Speed in shooting is not a huge surprise for fans of High Elves. So basically what these guys could do was move, shoot and move again, which was unique in Man of War, so it makes them very, very manoeuvrable. But they could only move, they only have sails. So I haven't really talked about that, but these guys, the Empire ships, have sails, but as you can see down here, they also have oars. So if the wind goes against them, they can move in one or two ways. These guys, the dwarfs, move by steam, so they're not dependent on the wind at all. But what it means is, if hypothetically you destroy the sails on these ships, they can still move by oars, or vice versa. Whereas on these guys, if you destroy the steam engine, then they're completely immobile, as you may well see in the battle report. Same with these guys; they can only move via sail. So as soon as you destroy the masts or the wind goes against them, the High Elves are in real trouble. After those, we had the Eagle ships, which is this one. See, the pennants have come off this at some point over the years, but slightly bigger ships, very, very powerful in the game. and cool, kind of cool models, very stylised high elves of the day. And this guy, which is the dragon ship. So this is the high elves Big Daddy, and it had the fluff behind this is it's actually got blades on the front here, and what this one basically does is charge into other things and cuts them open, so it can move straight through a ship, straight through you, and cut it in half, which is pretty cool, and it does come off. But the high elves are a very tough fleet to use, so they might be making an appearance. And is that? Oh, would you look at that? We've also got a dragon rider. I painted this guy. I didn't know I'd done this. I didn't think we'd have any dragon riders. But you can have a fleet of flyers like this. A squadron of flyers like the War Balloons, or the Manticore Riders, or the Wyvern Riders. But some of them, such as the Dragon Riders, were independents. So yeah, I obviously painted this up to help a high elf army. And it's a very cool model. I like the model a lot. But yeah, this is a good example of one of the Man of War flyers. So you got a little high elf there riding on a dragon. I've totally forgotten I painted this guy. And I got another couple of these because dragon riders were actually pretty effective. They're pretty decent in the game, whereas most of the flyers aren't. But you can see that they are lovely models. I think this is a really, really nice little sculpt. Very high fantasy, very Warhammer of the 90s, but it's cool. So yeah, you can have dragon riders in your army. And finally, that leaves us onto the... I suppose I'll show these. At the back here, I've got the pirate ships. So you'll notice this is exactly the same as the war galley I showed you here, but they had the pirate flag. So this was the stuff you got in the box. You got something like 6 Empire ships and 6 pirate ships, and they were the main combatants. But the pirates then never got developed into a full fleet. They were just Empire ships. And finally, we have the Dark Elves. So I want to start with which one's the better ones? Probably this guy. These are called the Helldrakes, I believe. Helldrakes, and that was a Death Fortress. Are they called that? I think the monster on this, the dragon thing, was called a Helldrake, but I think these might have been called something different. But yeah, this is very, very Dark Elves, classic 90s Dark Elves. There was a lot of fluff in the 90s about the Dark Elves, about them being seafarers, and they used to use these monsters. So they got these giant dragons with these huge kind of cities built on their back, which is pretty cool. So this is the smallest of the Dark Elf ships of the line. And again, they moved in a slightly different way. They didn't use, obviously dragons don't use, they didn't use the wind, they didn't use oars, they just used the dragon's movement. But every time the dragon took a wound, took damage, it would slow the ships down, which is very, very cool. So the Dark Elves are a very powerful army, but they're also quite vulnerable, that as soon as you can wound the dragon and it can leave and take your entire ship down with it. So they're an army I quite like using actually, but again, they're quite complicated, so we probably won't use them in the battle report. So those are the smallest ships of the line. Then you had these guys, which are the Death Fortresses, which are kind of essentially just a bigger scaled up version, but these were independents, so they were Man of Wars, which was pretty cool. Again, lovely models, not the best paint jobs on them. Again, I could do with a bit of shading. Just chucking a whole bunch of Nuln oil over this will probably greatly improve the thing. But there's part of me that really quite likes the bright colours. It's quite Warhammer of the time, I think. And I've also got a squadron of Manticore Riders painted up. So again, these weren't done by me, but I bought these. So these are quite cool. These are pretty good in the game. Not as good as, they're much better than the horrendous War Balloons, but not as good as the Dragon Riders. But you could get squadrons of these. And you can see I've got again, you've got the numbers on the bases saying 1, so that you can tell them apart. Come on. Yeah, so you can tell them apart in the game. But again, cool little monsters. Yeah, these Manticore Riders flying around attacking your ships, which is kind of fun. And I saved the best to last because we also have this, which is the Black Ark of Nagaroth. And I don't know if you know your Warhammer fluff, but the Black Arks were very, very famous in Warhammer because they were huge floating cities that used to raid Ulthia and the Land of the High Elves, and they'd just turn up and basically disembark an entire Dark Elf army. They were fortresses that had been made to float by magic, and this is hands down the best ship in the game. It is unstoppable. To give you some idea, a war galley is 50, so one of these guys is 50 points. The great ship over there is 150, and this was 250 points. So it's absolutely huge and nigh on unstoppable in the game. It's it's a kind of all your eggs in one basket thing for the Dark Elves, but if this thing ever does go down, you're probably going to lose the game. But to make it go down is a big job. It's also, you can see this gate at the back, that's called the Beast Portal, and what it can do is store other ships inside. So all these bits here, you can start the game with all of these Gribblies stored inside the Black Ark, which is pretty cool. And so it keeps them safe. But there is a downside to that if the Beast Portal gets damaged or destroyed, as you'll see this can happen in the battle report, then all those ships get lost. So it's kind of, everything's kind of thought through. But this also formed the basis, I don't know if I'll ever show you my Warhammer ships, my fantasy scale ships, but I made a Warhammer scale one of these. You know, it's not quite to scale, it's scaled down, but based off this exact design with a skull at the front, which is downstairs in the garage somewhere, I think. So who knows, maybe next time I'm back here, that'll be my next retrospective, just quite what I was up to in the late 90s, making Warhammer naval rules. But there you go, there is the Black Ark and Nagaroth, and that completes the Dark Elf fleet. So, as I said, these aren't all of them. There's also a Bretonnian fleet, which I never got, that's very, kind of looks like the Empire, lots of sails, and there was an Orc and Goblin fleet that my mate's got, which is quite cool. And then all the Chaos ships were incredibly highly stylised. They had like flying cities and plague ships, and the Khorne ones had sharks, like giant mechanical sharks that could tear into stuff, which is really cool. But that gives you hopefully some idea of what Man of War looked like. And as I said, there will be a battle report coming up, possibly tomorrow. If it's not tomorrow, it'll be in the next few days. And it will have the Empire fleet playing against, I want to say the Dwarfs potentially, maybe the High Elves, because I think the Dwarfs will just look better. But we'll just be using a few ships. We'll be playing a relatively small game to give you an idea of how it plays. So there you go. That is Man of War. An absolute passion of mine, something I really love, and whenever I come back here to my folks I always try and ring my mate Adam, who's going to be at the battle report, and try and get a couple of games in just to keep our hand in and for the nostalgia value. And there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this. Have a look on eBay if you are interested in getting into it, or if you know me and we're going to a tournament or something, give me a shout, and who knows, maybe we could sort out a few games if you want to try it out. But it's a great game, and I'd highly recommend giving it a go if you ever get the opportunity. So, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Something a bit different, probably on Let's Try Tuesday. And as ever, don't forget to comment, like, share and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Support Jamie on Patreon. Support your Hobbit hobby, and happy strategy battle gaming.